My name is Kelly Campbell, and I am the Associate Director at the Institute for Child Development and Family Relations at Cal State San Bernardino. Our institute serves children, parents, and families in the inland region through research, education, and applied services. Today, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Lisa Looney. Dr. Looney is an associate professor in the Department of Child Development. Her research examines development and behavior within educational contexts, with an emphasis on motivational constructs as they relate to teachers, parents, and children. Dr. Looney received her PhD in human development from the University of Maryland, specializing in educational psychology. So with that, please join me in welcoming Dr. Lisa Looney.
Thank you, Kelly. I'm happy to be here, happy to talk about this topic. As Dr. Campbell mentioned, I have a research background in motivation, so it is a passion of mine. But I also come to this topic from the perspective of a parent. I am a mother of 4 children. My children age and range from 9 to 17. And so figuring out ways to help them be motivated towards various tasks is a personal passion, as well as a professional passion. So, the reason I enjoy this topic so much is because it does apply a lot to those working with children. So whether you are a parent, whether you are a teacher, whether you are a coach in working with them in sports, however you're working with children, the ability to motivate them towards particular tasks is part of the everyday comings and goings of your time with them. So I hope to take information that we know from theory and research, explain that a little bit, and then help to give some practical application to that information. I also want to note that what I'm going to discuss today is I'm centering it around children, but the theories and research that I'll be presenting is really applicable to all ages. So whether you want to motivate yourself, motivate a significant other, anybody that you might want to motivate, these are things that you can think about, but I will center it around a discussion of children. So let me start by really getting us on the same page about what motivation is. So motivation is that internal state that gets us excited about a topic, that moves us in the direction of completing that task, and maintains us in that task when things get rough. So when we are motivated for something, we want to oftentimes do it for various reasons. We stick with it. We're excited to do it. That is the type of motivation that we're talking about here. In addition, I want to point out that motivation varies in terms of its type. So it is often talked about in terms of being intrinsic or extrinsic. So when we talk about intrinsic motivation, we're talking about something internal, something self-determined. We want to engage in the task because it is enjoyable to us. It's something we want to do. When we talk about extrinsic motivation, that is more determined by others, something external to us. So when we engage in a task because we get some sort of reward from it, that is considered an extrinsic motivation. So tasks fall along a continuum from being intrinsic or self-determined to extrinsic or determined by others. And so some of us have tasks that we are highly intrinsically motivated for. We really enjoy it. We don't need any rewards or incentives to engage in that task. We just do it because we love it. Children are the same. Children have activities that they enjoy doing just simply for the pure enjoyment of it. We also have tasks in our lives that we're entirely extrinsically motivated for. So maybe we don't enjoy it so much, but it does offer some sort of reward at the end. So for us adults, that might be something like working. Maybe we don't necessarily enjoy working, but it gives us a paycheck. And so that's an extrinsic motivator to get to work every day. But I want to point out that these fall along a continuum. So tasks themselves can sometimes be a little bit of both. Maybe we do enjoy them, but sometimes just need that extra push from an extrinsic source in order to get us motivated for it on a day-to-day basis. And so they're going to vary in terms of their intrinsic and extrinsic levels. And when we're talking about motivation, I also want to point out as we begin this discussion that there's different facets of motivation. There are different things that we look at when we are talking about motivation. So for instance, motivation involves the choices that people make about their behavior. So why is it, for example, that some children choose to play a particular sport and others don't want to play a sport at all? Why do some children choose to go to college and others choose not to? Why do some children choose to do their homework and others choose not to do their homework? So what are those choices that people make about their behavior, and why do they do so? That factors into what we understand about motivation. Motivation is also about understanding how long it takes somebody to get started on a task. So some children, for example, will come home and they will start their homework right away. They are motivated to start that task immediately. Others will put off homework until they are reminded incessantly to do it, and may not even start it even then. And so those choices that we make about when to start a task are also part of what we understand with regard to motivation. Motivation also looks at the intensity or level of involvement in a task. So some children will engage in a task and they will be fully in it. They will be fully engaged. They are really not distractible while in the task. Others are more distractible, not necessarily as engaged. They're doing the task, but they're not really high energy, not really high intensity. So motivation helps us to, what we know about motivation helps us to understand this level of intensity and involvement. So when you think about athletes, for example, if anybody's watching the Olympics, as I am, those Olympic athletes clearly have intense involvement. They engage in the task. They do it for multiple hours a day, 7 days a week, in such an intense way that they get to the point of being an Olympic athlete. We also, in understanding motivation, look at what causes a person to persist or through obstacles in a task, or give up when those obstacles are reached. So why is it that some people really power through and others might give up even at the first sign of difficulty? And then finally, when we're looking at motivation, we're also looking at what an individual is thinking about and what they're feeling during an activity or task. So motivation is also about examining those feelings and what they're thinking. So are they experiencing enjoyment in the task? Are they experiencing frustration? And how does that impact their motivation? So again, many different facets of motivation, some of which I will touch on as we discuss these different approaches, but all of those encompass our understanding of motivation. Right. Motivation is really linked to shaping and guiding behavior. Parents and teachers, for example, talk about motivation so much because they want to shape and guide their children's behavior in such a way that they are motivated toward particular tasks. And they hope that children get that motivation so that they are wanting to engage in various tasks. And those tasks that parents and teachers want for their children will vary from household to household and from classroom to classroom. So think about the behaviors that you want your children that you are associated with to be motivated toward. So for many, maybe that is that you just want your children to pick up their clothes off the floor, right? Not leave their shoes laying around the house. Maybe you want your children to be motivated to do their homework and do it well. Or maybe you want children to be helpful with household tasks and engage in tasks willingly that, such as cleaning, cooking, any other tasks that help around the house to help that family function, or the functioning of the family grow. But often what we find as, we work with children is that there is a lack of motivation for some of these tasks that we want our children to engage in. So that lack of motivation is a common obstacle in completing the tasks that are desired by parents and teachers. So you want your children to pick up their clothes off the floor and keep their rooms clean, but they don't do it. You want children to complete homework and get excited about school subjects, but they don't want to. You want them to engage in household tasks, and they don't want to do it. So that lack of motivation happens for children. Keep in mind, it also happens for us adults. We don't always have the desire to engage in tasks either. And so it is a common obstacle on all levels. And so we're going to talk about ways, reasons for that and ways to potentially combat it. All right, so the approaches to motivation that I'm going to talk about today are grounded in really three different areas of motivation research. First is that the understanding that motivation can be a function of rewards and incentives, those extrinsic things that we might offer a child can help with motivation. And motivation is also a function of children's thinking and beliefs about themselves and their abilities. So we will talk about how that relates, as well as how motivation is a function of some of the basic needs that children have. And all of these can impact motivation in both good and bad ways. So let's start by talking about rewards and incentives. So this is the area of motivation that I find that many people are most familiar with. So if you've ever used a sticker chart to help motivate a child, or given them money as a reward, or perhaps a sweet treat like M&Ms, or given them praise, talking about how thankful you are for their helpfulness, all of those things can act as rewards and can motivate children. I am often asked whether fear and punishment can motivate. And the answer to that is yes, fear and punishment can certainly be a motivator. It is for us adults as well. However, what we do know is that reinforcing and rewarding behaviors that we want can be more motivating for children than punishing behaviors that we don't want. So rewards and incentives are where we will focus. All right. So given that rewards and incentives can and do work, why, you might ask, does it not work in certain instances with your children? So I can speak personally for this. I have certainly offered rewards and incentives to my children, and my children's rooms are still messy, and they still don't want to start their homework when they come home. And so we have to examine why it isn't working. As individuals working with children in whatever capacity, it's important to really be reflective about the why that is happening with behavior. Why is a child not doing a particular task? And there are a variety of reasons why this could occur. It could be that the incentive, the reward that's being offered isn't worth it to the child. Not every child is motivated by the same thing. So, many of you who might have more than one child at home, or more than one child in a classroom, certainly, might have noticed that what works for one child doesn't work for another. So really finding that reward or incentive that is meaningful for the child will be one of the key parts of getting a reward or incentive to help with motivation. It could be that you've used it and it worked, and now it's just run its course. It was a short-term fix, but it's just not something that they want any longer. And so that can happen too. We can use a reward too much and too often to the point where the child is not motivated by it any longer. It also can be that, the extrinsic, or related to this, is that the extrinsic reward is not enough to really make that child internally desire to do the task. So despite the fact that they get allowance for helping with, around the house, it doesn't necessarily say to them, this working around the house is something that I am dying to do and want to do it. So extrinsic rewards don't necessarily help to cultivate that internalization and that intrinsic desire to engage in a task. And motivation is just complex. Not everyone can be motivated all of the time. Not everyone can be extrinsically driven by various rewards and incentives. And the rewards and incentives are focusing on that extrinsic element. Remember, there's the continuum from intrinsic to extrinsic. And so rewards and incentives are really working only at one end of that continuum, as opposed to thinking about the entire continuum and thinking about some aspects that might get at more of those intrinsic elements. All right, so the additional methods that I'm going to talk about really get at more of those internal pieces. They require that we look at a child's needs, a child's thought process, what the child is feeling, what they're believing, because that also contributes to motivation in powerful ways. So let's talk about some of these. The first is that we know that people are more motivated for tasks that they believe they have the ability to complete. So a belief in ability is a key factor in motivation. So when a child believes that they can be successful at a task, they're going to be more likely to want to engage in it. So we build these beliefs about our ability in various ways. Perhaps the most powerful way is through our direct experiences. You know, if I, as a child, choose to play soccer and I get out there on the soccer field and I am doing really well, my coach is praising me, I'm scoring goals, I'm doing all of that stuff, that's going to give me information that says, hey, I'm good at this, and might make me more motivated. On the flip side, if I get out there on the soccer field and I miss the ball every time I kick it, you know, people are stealing it from me all the time, my coach is telling me I'm not doing well, that's going to add to my belief in my inability. And I might not want to go to soccer practice anymore because I'm not motivated. I don't believe I can do it. And therefore I'm not motivated for it. So our direct experiences with a task impact our beliefs. What people tell us that we're good or not so good at can impact our beliefs and our ability. So those things, again, will be related to motivation. So perhaps a child isn't doing their homework because they don't believe they can successfully complete it. Perhaps a child doesn't want to play a particular sport because they're worried about their ability. Or the flip side, maybe they're excited to do homework or engage in a sport because they do believe they can. So this gets at, once again, understanding the why a child is not engaging in a task. Once we understand that why, and if it's related to belief, we might be able to move children in a particular direction to help them find what they are good at, so that they can be more motivated toward that task. So you might also say, well, I know that my child believes they have the ability to clean their room, but they still don't clean their room, right? So how does that work? So belief in ability is one piece, but also valuing a task is an important element of motivation. So people are motivated for tasks they value. So yes, I believe I can clean my room, but I don't like cleaning my room. I don't see the value in cleaning my room. So I am not going to be motivated to clean my room. So task value matters as well. And there are different types of value, different types of ways that we can value a task. One of those ways is an intrinsic value. So maybe it's a task that we just simply enjoy. So it's valuable in that regard. We get a great enjoyment from doing it. Perhaps it's a task that helps us reach a goal. So maybe you've told your child you don't get to go out with your friends tonight unless you've cleaned your room. Now, all of a sudden, that cleaning of their room takes on some value, and they might be more motivated to complete it simply because of that utility value. And then attainment value, that just to show that we can accomplish something. So maybe a high schooler decides to apply for college, even though nobody in his family has applied for college or gone to college before, because he just wants to show that he can and wants it for himself, that internal goal. So tasks can have value for that. So as long as we have one or more of those types of values associated with a task, and that those values don't, those ways that we value are above and beyond any potential costs of a task, and a cost can be the effort we have to put in, any sort of financial cost, of course. As long as those values are higher, we might be more motivated for the task. So a child might be wanting, that might have been told, hey, you don't get to go out with friends tonight unless you clean your room. And so it has high utility value, but the effort involved in that is so high, the cost is so high that they just say, forget it, I'm not going to go out with friends, and they don't do the task. And so those pieces of those types of value have to exceed the cost associated with it. All right. So in addition to beliefs about ability and valuing the task, what we think and feel about a particular task also plays a role, and it does so for children as well. So everyone experiences successes and failures in life, children as well. And what we tell ourselves about those successes and failures, that self-talk that we have, the reasons that we give, the excuses, the justifications, all of that can play a role in the amount of effort or motivation that we have for similar or future tasks. So, for example, if a child works hard on homework every day and turns homework in, gets bad grades, studies for tests, gets bad grades on tests, how that child reasons about that will impact future behavior. We are more motivated for things that we feel that we can control or that we're able to change. So if I tell myself, if I do poorly on a homework assignment or a test, and I tell myself that I just didn't study very hard, truth be told, I goofed off, I didn't study, I might be more motivated because that's something I can change and control. I might then say, you know what, I've got to do my homework and buckle down and study for the next test. If, however, I think I failed a test and I tell myself it's because the teacher's unfair, the teacher doesn't like me, that is out of my control, and things that involve things that I might not be able to change. And that's going to impact my motivation. So I may not want to then engage in the homework, because what's the point, right? If I've told myself that it's for these particular external reasons that I can't control, that motivation might suffer as a result. So our thinking, our self-talk plays a role in how we are motivated for tasks, how much effort we're going to put into tasks. All right, and then the final piece of information that I want to provide has to do with our inborn needs. So we all have this hierarchy of needs, as we know in psychology. That start from lower order physiological needs all the way up to what we call self-actualization, which has to do with really reaching our inner potential. And physiological needs have to do with hunger, thirst, those very basic human needs. Safety needs have to do with feeling, safe in our environments, psychologically as well as physically. We have a need to belong to family groups, others, friendships, have those people love us and love them back. We have a need to feel good about ourselves, our esteem needs. And once all of these needs are met, we can really work towards our inner potential. So as parents and teachers, we want children to be moving up this hierarchy. We want them at the top of the pyramid. We want them working towards self-actualization. And so we want them to be motivated for that. But what this approach tells us is that if those lower order needs are not being met, children are not going to be motivated. So if they are hungry, if they are tired, if they don't feel safe, they're not necessarily caring about tasks that we might care about for them. So those inner basic needs need to be met first in order to enhance motivation. All right, so what does all of this mean, and how can we use this information to motivate children? First, consider the rewards and incentives you use. Again, this is something that is often a go-to for those working with children, but really honing in on what rewards are meaningful for a child, and monitoring how we're using those rewards is also important. If we're using them too much or too little, not consistently enough, it can impact how children are motivated. Also thinking about whether we're actually rewarding or are we punishing. So if children are receiving a punishment for not completing a task and not really receiving a reward for completing it, it's that focus on punishment that might be impacting the motivation, as opposed to looking for the things that they are doing well and doing right, and rewarding those that might help to increase motivational factors. Helping to increase children's understanding of the value of a task. We should not assume that children recognize the value. We recognize as adults that having a clean household, contributing to family chores, that there's meaning for that. But we shouldn't assume that children understand that value. So really getting them to see that, when you help me, clean a house or work in the yard, you're contributing in great ways to this family unit, and helping them to understand that the value of that is an important element to increasing motivation. Assisting children in building accurate beliefs in their ability. So really understanding why, again, this gets at the understanding why children aren't doing a task, and narrowing down whether or not it has to do with their beliefs and their ability. Helping them to find those tasks and activities that they are good at. Not everybody is good at the same things. And so finding, if you're looking, for instance, for a child to have an extracurricular activity so that they can get out of the house and do things. Finding where they are best suited in terms of their ability is important. Model positive attributions. Attributions here mean those that self-talk, what those reasons and justifications that we're giving for our successes and failures. So when you as an adult hit an obstacle in tasks that you're doing, what do you model for your children? Do you give up? Do you say, I can't do it? What sorts of reasons do you give? And think about giving reasons and thinking about the reasons and tasks in your own life that you can control, that are possibly changeable, and thinking about ways that you can do that will be a good model for the children to do the same in their own life when they might experience possible obstacles. And then fulfill their basic needs. When we can, of course, make sure that they're fed and clothed. That's certainly a very important basic need, but those sorts of things, fill their bucket with those, attention, love, support, make them feel safe. And that will ensure that they can work up that hierarchy and move toward that self-actualization where they are engaged in their best selves. Right. And then really all of this boils down to understanding the why. It can be really easy as a parent or a teacher or somebody that's working with children to assume that children are doing it just to get under our nerves, or on our nerves, under our skin. But really, when you look at children and their behavior, there's always a why to it. And the child themselves might not necessarily know the why. But the more that we explore that with children, talk through it with them, understand their thinking and feeling and their basic needs, the more we might be able to get at why a lack of motivation is occurring, why children are not engaging in a particular behavior. And we really need to understand that why in order to move forward in a proper method that's going to help to motivate. And always understand that motivation is complex. No one is motivated all of the time. And even for those tasks that we are motivated for, sometimes we just aren't motivated for them. That's true of us as adults. It's true of children. So motivation is a moving target. It's never a one size fits all. And even when you think you've got it with one particular child, that can shift over time. So really understanding that why of behavior is a key component. So with that, I will take any questions.
Here, how to motivate a 12-year-old who seems unmotivated since COVID began?
Okay. Yeah. So COVID, of course, has brought all sorts of different challenges. I would perhaps start with saying that maybe they are motivated for something. We just haven't found what that is. And of course, COVID took away chances to be with friends. It took away all of those social elements. I know for my own children, they ended up spending more time online and gaming and doing those things that we as parents tend to be concerned about. But having a conversation, again, finding out the why, what is it that they might want to do? Are they engaged in things at home that can transfer to outside? So maybe they are social in ways or doing things in the home environment that you could, find activities that are similar outside. But having that conversation, because COVID hit many people hard, understanding why, and thinking about that for your own self. We have, even as adults, trouble, I'm finding at least, trouble getting out and having social events, and those social events tire me out, and it makes me not necessarily want to go. But I think having that conversation, understanding why they aren't motivated, and getting them to understand the value of getting back out there, back to that task value. Once they understand the importance of that, that might help in the motivation.
And says, my teenager doesn't see the point of anything. How do you motivate him? I mean, you've covered some of this through the talk. I don't know if there's much more to add, maybe specific to teens.
Yeah, I think this is something I hear frequently. I've tried everything and nothing works, right? And so it's a common question that I get from parents when dealing with motivation. And this gets at the really specific, complex nature of motivation, that I would argue your child is motivated for something. You just have to find out what that is. And sometimes children are showing us what they're motivated for, but we don't necessarily like it. It's not an activity that we want them to engage in. And so we say that they're not motivated for anything because they're not motivated for the things that we want them to do. And that's not necessarily true in this case, but something to at least reflect on as a parent. And so, yes, finding those activities for children can be difficult, and it's especially difficult in COVID at times, right? But rather than approaching it as you're never motivated for anything, I can't get you to do anything, have conversations about and really start to look in your own interactions with the child, find those pieces of things that they are interested in. What sorts of television programs are they watching? What games are they interested in playing? Maybe you can find some nugget of something for a particular activity. Then these questions sometimes are hard to answer because I don't have the specifics of what you've tried and what you haven't tried. But every child is motivated for something. I can promise you that. Even if it's for sitting down and having a movie night and watching television, right? That's a motivation. We are motivated for certain tasks, but really start to think about what those tasks are, and are we trying to move children towards tasks that we want them to engage in, and we're calling them unmotivated because they aren't going in that direction. Or, do we just need to explore additional options?
What can I use to motivate my son to do his homework? And I guess I wanted to add in there, do you happen to know if there are gender differences with respect to motivation toward certain tasks like this?
Not necessarily. And homework, again, is one of those. And again, it's really hard sometimes to answer these questions because motivation can be so specific. But homework, if it doesn't have any value, it can be very unmotivating. So do teachers talk about the homework when they get back? Does it serve a means to, is it like math homework where maybe I'm practicing so that I can get good at doing well on tests? Or is the homework assignment not really meaningful or not really having value? So from the teacher side of it, I would certainly hope that teachers are giving homework that is meaningful, but not all homework serves that purpose. And so it can be potentially that they don't see the value in the task itself because either the teacher hasn't made that value clear, and maybe from a parent perspective, we can help with that and help them to recognize the value of sometimes with my own children, I will talk about the value of doing things we don't want and jumping through hoops, right? That, you may not see the value. Maybe the teacher doesn't have any value for it, but in life, we will do things that we have to do that we don't want to do in life all the time. And so let's use this as an activity I know you don't want to do it and it's boring, but this is just a life lesson in how life will operate forever. When you go to work, you will have to engage in tasks you don't want to do. So finding some sort of meaning for it, but also, I hesitate to say this somewhat, but I do this with my own children. Also recognize that maybe not all homework, it has to be done. Talk with the teacher about that. If the child is really not being motivated for school because they're spending time on homework and they don't want to do it, and homework is causing a fight at home and it's impacting how a child feels about education, I think opening up a conversation to the teacher to say, how much homework should my child be engaging in? Here's the obstacle that I'm up against. Partner with the teacher in that, because we don't, and I think a lot of educators would agree, we don't want homework to be the thing that keeps children from enjoying the learning process. So I think that's another element of it.
It was about homework, but this parent said that it's their 7-year-old and that the resistance to do it drags on for sometimes an hour. So I don't know if there's anything more you wanted to add, Dr. Looney, to that one. Like the parent says, how can they make them realize they just need to do it, or that it's going to be a thing that they're going to need to do every night? Yeah. But I don't know what the 7-year-old context, if there's anything.
Yeah, no, I think, again, it relates to what I just said, but I think it's an important piece. I would also, again, reach out to the educator, the teacher involved, because I think you might find that lots of teachers aren't aware that homework is causing the fights at home. And I've gone through it as well. So I understand what that means. And you dread it as a parent because it can ruin an entire evening. I would say that if you can work also in short spurts, so maybe it's hey, if you can give me 10 minutes of doing homework, even if you don't complete it, you can enjoy some sort of reward. And maybe that's enough for the night, right? And work gradually toward recognizing that homework can be an okay experience, and helping to use some of those extrinsic rewards, but talking with the teacher about that, indicating that, the fighting is causing, really awful evenings, and we don't necessarily want the home environment to be like that either. And the teacher is not going to want them to hate their homework and hate the learning process. So working with the teacher to have some strategies like that to gradually reward over time, small increments of time. And so maybe homework isn't done all in one sitting, but it's done at 10 minutes a pop, and getting reward time of being able to go outside and play or have some screen time or, have a snack. Those sorts of short increments might get the job done as opposed to just one sitting. Because again, thinking about it, as adults, we see the value in just sit down, do it, and you can have the whole rest of the evening. But children might not operate in that way. And maybe the short spurts are what works. Okay, great.
This is a question I have myself. When does too much praise for good behavior cross the line and lead to narcissism?
Praise is an interesting, I could do probably a whole another webinar on that, but praise is one of those interesting elements because we tend to praise in our culture, we tend to praise a lot for how smart somebody is and not necessarily how much effort they're putting in. And there's research to show detriments for that, that children who are praised for being smart end up actually less motivated than those that are praised for the effort that they're putting in, regardless of the outcome. So there's a lot to be said about praise. We also tend to sometimes give empty praise. So as parents, it's really easy to just say, "Oh, great job! That's wonderful, great job!" Because we're also busy ourselves, and so some of that empty praise can also be detrimental. On the a third thing I'll say about praise is that sometimes children are so used to being praised, and we feel that we have to praise so much that children don't recognize the value of failure. And there is great value in letting children fail while they're children, and perhaps not receive a particular reward at school because they didn't get homework done, or maybe not get a trophy at the end of the sports season. There's sometimes we do praise so much that we aren't really embracing what can be learned from mistakes and failure, and that I think is a detriment. So I can't necessarily speak to narcissism per se, but I do think that how we praise children is something that we need to give much greater thought to, and we need to learn to embrace the natural consequences and the failure a lot more.
Okay, that's helpful. Okay, I don't have the age for this child, but the question is, how do you motivate a child to understand the importance of good self-appearance, like table manners, tucking in a shirt, without embarrassing them?
Yeah, that's good. I have this in my own house too. I think that this is sometimes. I think there's guiding.
Sorry, he's seven. Sorry, she just responded.
Perfect. Okay. I think there's some guidance that we can do as parents, and then there's also sort of a reflective piece to what we're valuing in terms of appearance. And there's also a natural consequence all wrapped into one here. I think that we certainly want to instill in our children and socialize them to partake in various hygiene habits, right? That's just to be a functional member of society. That's good to teach our children, and that's important. But what they value in terms of appearance sometimes can differ from what we value in terms of appearance. So, maybe they're wearing a shirt that looks ratty and old, or maybe they're not combing their hair so much. And they're still taking showers, and they're, doing those basic hygienic, pieces, but they just don't necessarily look as put together. And we know that it can reflect on us as parents, or at least we have that feeling like, oh, I don't want to send you out of the house looking like that because people will think I didn't dress you right. So there's that component that we have to know for ourselves. But natural consequences will also occur. If a peer makes a comment about the way somebody's dressing, we don't want our children to go through that, of course. We want to try and shape and guide them in such a way. But if they're comfortable in their own skin, doing their own thing, and that's not affecting them in such a way, I would argue that eventually appearance will matter, and eventually they will, as they get older in particular. That little one is still age 7. But those peer influences will help to guide and shape that behavior as we move forward. But continuing to talk about the value of that, letting them choose clothing that they want, giving them some choice. Do you want to, I don't know what type of hairstyles that child, but I used to have a variety of choices. My daughter could go in and this is the hairstyle I want today. So she felt like she had some ownership over what her hair looked like, what she was wearing. So sometimes giving that ownership can be a motivator in and of itself, as opposed to the parent always saying, this is how you have to be dressed.
Thank you. So someone says, I heard the saying, good trying instead of good job can help with motivation. Is that true, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so that gets more at praising that effort. You tried really hard. That was a tough task, and you powered through, even though it was difficult. And I saw you got frustrated in the middle of that, but you really moved through that. Talking about their effort and their trying is better than talking about the outcome. And that's just a focus on process over product. And especially when we live in a world and have an educational system that is very product oriented, the grades matter at the end, and the educational system itself is sort of predicated on that. The focus on that process can be particularly critical, so that they know that it's not the outcome that you as the parent or teacher are striving for, even though we, of course, want our children to succeed and do well. But ultimately, what we really want is that internal desire to put forth the effort in the task. And so focusing on the end product takes away from the process. So the more, yes, that we can praise the process, the better.
My 3-year-old doesn't understand what it means to say, we have to clean your room because this is how we show respect for where we live. But I say it anyway because I think it will lead her to understand. Is this correct, or do I wait until my child can really understand what I'm saying before I say?
No, I think what you're doing is on the right track there. Explaining and whether you can use those terms, you can use terms that maybe might be more understandable for a 3-year-old, right? We are part of a family, and all families contribute to, help with the house. This helps show the house that it's loved. Something that a 3-year-old might understand in other language, but absolutely on the right track with that. That doesn't necessarily mean that your 3-year-old is going to grow up and love to clean. There will be a point in time where cleaning is no longer fun, but that task value will be part of just her natural way of doing things and understanding. And so understanding that task value is part of getting that motivation to occur. And so I think absolutely you're doing the right thing. Keep saying it, even in the way that you're doing it, or switching some of those words to where it might be more understandable.
School attendance, how to get students to school.
Again, not knowing the specifics, children, of course, want to have days at home. Many of them, unfortunately, aren't motivated to go to school, particularly as they get older. And so I think there are a couple of things here. Understanding, again, that this is, there's some utility value here. This is something that we have to do as a means to an end. There's many different things we can talk about in terms of valuing of education, but that's not necessarily what somebody wants to hear when they don't want to go to school. So talking about that value, having those conversations, understanding why they don't want to go to school. Again, understanding the why of the behavior is really critical here, because there could be several different reasons why, and those various reasons will really chart your course of action. So if a child, for example, is not wanting to go to school because of a bullying situation or something where they feel unsafe, that's very different than I want to just stay home and watch TV all day, right? Those are two very different things. So having those conversations about why, having the conversations again about those bigger life lessons. We've got to do things in life we don't want to do. But I also think that recognizing that sometimes a mental health day isn't so bad either, right? Is it just that your child needs a little bit of a break? We put a lot of emphasis on physical health, but I think mental health is also super important. So sometimes just, knowing if your child knows that not all the time, right? But maybe on occasions we can stay home, just have that day where we veg because adults need them, children do too, might help them to get through the daily grind, knowing that might be coming. But also going back to, those rewards and incentives too. I don't want to, I talked a lot about the internal pieces and the valuing, but coupling that with some of those rewards and incentives to at least help along in the process can be good.
Great. So I think that concludes our session. I don't see any more questions. With that, I would love to thank you, Dr. Looney, for joining us today. And of course, my thanks to all of you for participating in today's webinar, which was hosted by the Institute for Child Development and Family Relations at Cal State University, San Bernardino. At the ICDFR, we've been providing guidance for parents and families based on science and best practice since 2002. To hear more from us, please like and follow us on Facebook and visit our YouTube page where all of our webinars are available. You can also learn more about our projects by visiting our website, csusb.edu/ICDFR. And again, thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful day and be well.